Hello and welcome to Fertile Forward. I'm Sadie Minkoff with Sage Acupuncture. And today I have the pleasure to speak with Aga Crump, who is a licensed professional counselor intern. Welcome, Aga.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you, Sadie.
You too. So we are really talking about infertility in this series. And I know that a good part of your counseling work has to do with reproductive health.
Yes, it does. Most of my clients come in because of either infertility or pregnancy loss.
Right? And so that is sort of a sub-specialty of yours is actually reproductive loss and miscarriage. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I got drawn in because of my own personal experience. I had two early pregnancy losses myself, and it was the hardest thing that I'd ever gone through. And I felt very isolated when I was experiencing that. I felt like people didn't really understand the depth of the grief that I was experiencing. It was at a time of my life where a lot of my friends were getting pregnant, but nobody was experiencing loss. So my peer group couldn't really relate to me. And I felt really alone, and I was pursuing my master's in counseling, and I thought, this is really what I want to focus on. I don't want other people to feel this alone. I want to be able to help provide support for other people who are experiencing loss, because it is very intense. And it is also often forgotten by the rest of the world around the people that are going through it. So that's really what led me to this. I feel very passionate about it. I feel like my own experience helps other people to be able to connect to me, to know that I know what they're going through. And going through that has just kind of morphed also into helping people through infertility in different ways. You know, for people who have trouble conceiving, people who have been able to conceive but then have loss, kind of everything that falls under that umbrella.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that all across the infertility spectrum, people are not supported in this
Right.
process, and that most transitions in life or, places where we are grieving so deeply, there are some systems in place. People, I always say people bring you casseroles and, send you notes and ask, how they can help. And this is so private and personal.
Very invisible, right? It's not a loss that people can see.
Mhm.
That's not tangible. So we can't see it, then it's hard to provide support sometimes.
So then what does it look like in your practice when somebody comes to see you? What is that like?
Yeah, so they'll come in and we'll kind of talk about their journey. Often, once they're at the time they come into my office, they've been through a lot already, and they haven't really had a safe space to be able to share their experience. So that's what I try to provide. I try to provide just a safe space for them to just kind of let go, feel supported, talk to somebody who knows the language, because infertility comes with its own terms and dictionary, and just somebody outside of their family system, outside of their friends, who can help walk alongside them on this journey, because it can be really draining. And I help provide them psychological and emotional support, coping techniques, and kind of evaluate different ideas or options, talk about their reproductive story, kind of what they really want in life and what that looks like in their idea of a family, and all sorts of different things. Boundaries, we talk about how to talk about this with family members, with friends. The list goes on.
Yeah, that's great. So I know that you have described your work as relational, you
Mhm.
have a relational approach. Um, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. That means that to me, the relationship is the most important thing in the room, and studies actually show that that's what is most important in therapy. So over experience, education, all those other things, um, that really determines this, whether therapy is successful or not, is the relationship between the client and the therapist. So I really work on building that with my clients. I really work on establishing good rapport, building trust, creating safety, so they feel connected, so they feel like they are in a safe place, that they can trust me, that they can be genuine and authentic here, and know that I'm not going to judge them. I come from a place of just really wanting to hold this space sacred for them, and that they feel that support.
Great. Yeah. I feel like just like any other process that we go through or any other transition, we go through different stages of it and relate to it differently.
Yeah, well, I will say that it looks different for everybody, just like grief looks different for everybody. There are some similarities, but some people will come in for a handful of sessions and they'll feel better. They feel like they have the support and guidance that they want. And then some people come in for a longer term. I have people sometimes come in after loss, or when they're going through infertility, and they conceive, and then they think they're ready to graduate, but sometimes there's some anxiety that comes up and they end up staying throughout the pregnancy journey with me. And then I get to meet their new babies, which is always just so rewarding. So it really, I think there's a wide spectrum. It really depends on what kind of support does this person need. Do they need short-term grief support? Do they want some more longer-term relational therapy and working on maybe some deeper issues, or just some more long-term support? Yeah, it really kind of matters on the goals of that the client has. And that's another part of being relational, is I want to support them. I don't have a one size fits all protocol. It really kind of depends on what that person walks into the room with and what feels right for them. I do usually start by seeing people on a weekly basis, and that really kind of helps build momentum and helps us get to know each other. And then I usually kind of let them take the reins as to, when do you feel good enough to where you want to go to every other week, or where you feel like you might transition out of therapy. And really depends on what kind of support they are needing at the time. Some people go to bi-weekly and then they come back to weekly, and kind of fluctuates throughout whatever is happening in their life, where they need more or less support.
That's great. So do you see women exclusively, or do you also see men or couples?
I mostly see women. Occasionally I'll see a couple. I will say that there are some great clinicians in town that work with couples, and my focus is really on supporting women through this.
Gotcha. Great. So I'm a little curious just about your backstory, about how you became interested in therapy overall,
Okay.
and yeah, what your relationship with your work is.
Yeah, well, gosh, I've always been interested in human behavior and psychology and therapy. And I remember being in high school and I took psychology as a junior, and then I took psychology honors as a senior, and I was so excited, or psychology AP. And I just loved it. So I've always just been so interested in it. Both of my parents are physicians, so they're in the helping profession. So I was kind of introduced to that at a young age, and I knew I didn't want to do that, but I was drawn to kind of the helping professions. And then I majored in psychology and in college, and did some research, and I was considering pursuing a doctorate, but really was not ready to commit to something like that. And so I got a master's degree in organizational leadership, and I thought that will give me an opportunity to really study human behavior and be involved in that way, but in kind of the business world. So not kind of in that intense clinical setting. So So I did that for a little while, and I just kept getting pulled back to pursuing counseling. And I was looking at programs in Austin, and um, I had my first miscarriage. And after that, I decided, this is something that I want to do. And I felt really, as cheesy as it might say to say this, I felt called to it. And I felt like this is really now the time. I made excuses for myself in the past, like I haven't suffered enough to help other people who've been suffering. So who am I to tell somebody or provide support for somebody when they're grieving or when they're going through a difficult season in life? And after that first loss, I thought, well, this is my suffering, and I want to find purpose in it. And for me, it was very clear that this was my path. So I applied to graduate school for a master's in counseling. And before, I felt like, what would I do in this world if I entered the counseling world or the mental health world? And after I had that first loss, I thought, this is what I'm going to do. It really kind of honed in on, this is what I want to be doing. And then I had another loss, and then I thought, this is absolutely what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
A lot of own kind of healing and research and writing and reading through that graduate school experience. It was a really interesting but special time to go through that in a really supportive place.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about why we pursue what we pursue and what we're good at sitting with and being with and supporting other people through. I know that a lot of people struggle to just kind of get into therapy and take that first step. And I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom for people that are just on the edge there and need some support in just sort of getting some help.
Yes. Well, I think that initial contact is the hardest part. I really do. I think picking up the phone and making a call or sending an email is the hardest part of therapy. And once you've done that, you're halfway there. You can do it. So if you can kind of get up the courage to just make that first initial contact, then you're good to go. Most people come in and they're relieved because it takes a lot to work up to get that courage to reach out for help. We live in a society where you're just supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? So this kind of goes against the grain. But if you can just kind of get enough momentum going to make that first contact, then it gets much easier after that. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability to do that, to reach out to somebody and to ask for support, and know that you're being really brave when you do that. And it's not at all being weak. It's recognizing that this is hard and this is a struggle, and you're not meant to do it alone. We're not meant to do this alone.
Right. Yeah, I find that a lot of people struggle as far as when to move forward with their fertile process after a loss. And there's some, medical pressure on people, certainly if they're older or they've heard different things, but they're not emotionally prepared. And again, I know this is an individual thing, but do you have any words of wisdom for people really struggling with that question?
Yeah, that's really, really tricky to navigate. You're right? It's not like a death loss, let's say, right? It's very complex. There are a lot of things in play. And I think that if somebody is struggling with that, then therapy is a great option because it can help you kind of navigate the complexities of that and see, is this a time where we need to pause, or do I want to keep moving? Why am I making this choice? Do I feel pressured, or is it really authentically, this is what I want for my life, right? Just kind of like untangle all of those things that might be going on and might have you spinning or unsure of how to move forward, and whether it's fear that's preventing you from moving forward, or pressure, or maybe this is it. This is, you don't want to, right? And kind of looking at all of that and unpacking it all.
Yeah, great. So is there anything else about you or your work that you would like to share with people?
Um, well, if it's not clear from my answers, I really love what I do. I feel very honored and privileged to be able to do this work. I just, it's so rewarding, even though it can be so difficult to see just the pain and the suffering that my clients are going through. I feel very honored to be able to join them on their journeys and really just walk beside them through this really, really difficult season. Um, yeah, and just, it's really feels very, very special that I get to do this with them. And I don't take it lightly at all. I think it's just a really great privilege.
Yes, and I do know from our mutual patients um, how much they appreciate you and your work and walking with them during this time of transition and hardship. So thank you so much for your work and your heart.
Thank you, Sadie.